Cyber Nation Uncensored.
And we're live with another episode of Forlorn Dopes, Tales from Them. That includes myself, Cybersmily.
And me, Wisdom. Greetings, programs. It is good to be here yet again.
It is. So, start off with our ramblings of what's going on in the Cyberpunk world.
As always.
Yeah, so the only thing that I'm aware of that's coming up is the Peripheral, which is supposed to be coming out next week on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it'll be nice to see Gibson on the screen again.
It will be. Still no news on anything else like Mega City 1. And there's a few other things that are out there that they never really came to fruition.
Yeah, sadly, I think Mega might just turn into vapor. It's been in development for years now. They've been talking about it, and I don't know. It might be as likely as another season of Firefly at this point.
I've also seen trailers for, what was it, Tyrone Gets a Clone or something like that with Jamie Foxx. That's supposed to be coming out soonish. Which again, it looks more like a kind of cyber. Well, it does look like a goof, but it also looks like it's more based in. They cloned Tyrone. That's it. It looks like it's more based in the 70s, 80s, as opposed to a near future.
You know, I'm okay with that. I love 70s and 80s style blaxploitation films, so if it looks and sounds like they're going in that direction.
But it could be a good story for a Cyberpunk campaign, you know?
Sure. I mean, I've always had this background project in my head of like Cyberpunk meets blaxploitation. I'd call it Cyberpunk. And yeah,
there you go.
I
like that Cyberpunk.
Yeah, afros and biomex, man. I mean, it does big medallions and flying cars. Like, would it get any better?
No, it wouldn't. I think the Dark Horse published the latest, was it the Blackout series?
Yeah.
But they still have yet to give the last version of I Give You My Word. And that's the series that I love. You Have My Word.
They need to... They haven't announced anything new yet either, which is worrying. But with the popularity of edgerunners, I would imagine we're still going to get some stuff. Hopefully. Fingers definitely crossed on that. They're talking about a new novel. Like, they're starting a novel series based on 2077.
Really?
Yeah. I forget the name of the author. Let me... Just one moment. I'll look that up really quick. I had posted something on the... No Coincidence. By Rafat Kosik, uh, Rafal Kosik. It's supposed to be about a group of strangers as they discover the dangers of Night City.
Huh.
It'll be coming out in August of 2023.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it only took 30 years, but we're finally getting new novels for Cyberpunk.
Well, new novels for Cyberpunk 2077, right?
It's all the same universe.
It is the same universe.
And it's likely, what we're going to get going forward.
Yeah.
They've also announced a sequel to 2077. I know we spoke about that last week, but I'm still super excited about it. Hopefully it will be new characters.
And they also have a competition currently for people to come up with music, original songs to contribute.
There's going to be a new radio station in the update, Phantom Liberty.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're holding a contest for people to submit music. I'm kind of hoping Miracle of Sound throws something their way, because I some of the songs are kind of cheesy and they're all about the games that he writes about, but they also all like take place within the universe of the video games that he writes songs about. So I wouldn't mind seeing him get some representation.
Yeah, and there's a cash prize for songs that are selected, like $3,000, I believe. So
yeah,
you are getting paid for it. I think they're choosing the top 15 songs.
Yeah, anybody out there who's an amateur musician or even professional who just wants to be thrown in, submit your stuff.
And I guess Sasha Grey is going to be the DJ.
Website. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, go to the website for CDPR, CD Projekt Red, and throw your submission in. Or if you also want to send us a preview of it, we'll talk about it and give it an on-air review.
Most definitely.
We like music.
We do like music. Haven't heard too much on the Artelsaurian front. On anything coming out or coming soon. I do expect Mr. Jay Gray to be being on our next episode, which is November 2nd, I think.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, November 2nd. So we just need to finalize it with him. Hopefully he'll be able to join us, and we can talk a little bit about Cyberpunk Red and what's going on forward and what's planned, any type of new news or schedule, and just get some feedback from him. So definitely looking forward to that. On my site front, I haven't done too much. There's a couple tweaks, mostly bug fixes I've done to my site recently. I have a few things that I'm kind of working on to improve a couple of the different sections on the site. I'm starting to not think I might do a Cyberpunk Red character generator, just because it seems like the Red companion it now has a web interface, so I don't know if I should compete with them, or if I do compete with them, if Artelsaurian rather bank with them as opposed to me. So it is what it is. I can always ask Jay when he's on, and during our talk.
I'm very excited to see them getting a better web presence. I'd like to see Cyberpunk 2020 get some love. I realize that's a pipe dream at this point. That Red is the wave of the future. But yeah.
I mean, there's not much they can do with 2020 right now. You know, most of the
No.
they generalize the areas enough for DMs and referees alike to pick up and put in whatever they want. They definitely need to flesh out the time between 2020 and Red, and start filling in the gaps there. Because again, there's just so much stuff they put out for 2020 that really needs to be looked at and updated.
Agreed. They've got a long way to go in regards to, you know, fleshing out the world of Red. It'll be very interesting to see how they move forward with that. Hell, I'm just glad the property's alive again and moving.
Exactly. Yeah, and we should.
They can leave 2020 to us old grognards still running our sites.
Yeah. And I'm surprised we haven't gotten a DLC lately. Because it seemed like they were putting it out almost one a month. And
yeah.
This one was back in August.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, it looks like it. According to their site. I'm sure they're right now busy at work getting, I think, what was it, the Danger Girl dossier? I think is the next supplement that's coming out.
Dossier, Black Chrome, and apparently there's like Rusted Chrome now. I don't know if you've heard about that, but they announced that, which is supposed to be like all around nomads.
Yeah, but I think that's still in the infancy.
Oh, I'm sure it is. But nomad's getting some love. You know, I'm always for that.
Yep, you and your nomads, the dirty, rotten scoundrels that they are.
I mean, I think you mean freedom loving rascals. That's what they are.
Bunch of cannibals. Gary
Cannibals?
told me. Yeah, Gary the Prophet told me.
Gary's an asshole. We all know that.
Guess
that dirty bum sleeping on a mattress in an alley.
But that's where the truth comes from, man.
That is, in fact, where the truth comes from. There is no denying it.
So, yeah, I think that's kind of it for its quick pre-ramble discussion of what's currently in Cyberpunk world and what's kind of currently going on with our sites. Actually, I'm going to be starting my High Rider campaign next week, so kind of look forward to that.
Cool.
Yeah, so, and it's very interesting because I got 2 players who their last year in their life path both were in jail, and 2 other players whose life path they're wanted by law enforcement. I still have a 5th player who's still working on his character.
In space.
Yeah, so
I love it.
I'm starting it based on or they're going to start off in a orbital penitentiary, similar to
Fortress 2.
What's that?
Fortress 2.
I was thinking of the who's that guy? Guy Pearce movie.
Okay. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's a movie that was basically a kind of near future. Guy Pearce is like a cop who's kind of like got thrown out because, you know, of course he's a maverick, like all good cops. And he's basically contracted because I don't know if it's the president's daughter or some official's daughter was doing a like an interview on the space station of a prison, and he's sent up to go and retrieve her.
So, like,
Came out early, like in the early 2000s.
Escape from LA in space, huh?
Kind of, but it's a penitentiary, right? So it's a prison, and basically the prisons take over the whole facility. It's definitely after L.A. Confidential, and it was a name that didn't really match with what it was. Where is that? Lockout.
Fortress 2 was a Christopher Lambert. It's a sequel to a Christopher Lambert movie.
Yeah. But was that in space?
The second one was, I think. It's been a long time since I watched it. The first one, no. The first one was just a big prison out in the middle of the desert. I'm pretty sure the second one was in space. They 80s Christopher Lambert science fiction kind of runs into each other after a while. 90s, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Lockout, you should definitely go and check it out if you can. It's definitely very cyberpunkish.
I will definitely look that up. I did get around to watching The Car too.
Oh yeah?
And it was freaking cyberpunk. It was, yeah. Thank you for recommending that. It was nice. It was good fun.
Very weird cyberpunkish.
Yeah. I like that they kept the like supernatural aspects of the original The Car to a minimum, even though the car shows up. Instead, it runs kind of like the Revenge Road episode of Bubblegum Crisis. If the dude... Well, no, not really. Just go watch it. It's a good movie. It's very cyberpunk. Yeah, everybody listening, go watch The Car 2.
Well, from a cyberpunk game point of view, you could basically have someone soul killed and they like get downloaded into a car's computer.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what happens.
And takes the car and goes on a rampage.
In Cyberpunk, like practical applications for something like that, you know, like, is it really all that different putting a biopod in a car as it would be to a full body conversion? I mean, that would work.
Or a biopod in a tank.
I ran in one of my games, I had an AI controlled sports car. So it's yeah, it works. Like, it definitely makes for an interesting campaign idea. That was part of that whole Night City scramble. They won that race. And then the rest of the campaign was, you know, the corporations and mercenaries being sent after him to try and retrieve the car.
Nice. Yeah, you've done a lot of campaigns.
I mean, I've played a lot of Cyberpunk, and I ran it almost exclusively for like 20, 25 years.
Yeah, the problem is I didn't run it for like a decade or two because I lost a lot of my players.
Yeah, luckily, the only time I've ever had a problem finding players was during COVID, and after my heart surgery, when I just didn't have the energy to really do or care about much of anything. But then I met you guys online, and
Yep.
I didn't meet you. I mean, I've known you for like 20 years now, but we started hanging out and playing online, so that alleviated a lot of the COVID stress.
True.
But yeah, that was probably the longest period I've gone without gaming. When 3rd edition D&D dropped, I did stop running Cyberpunk for about 4 years. That was the longest active gaming stretch where I wasn't focused on Cyberpunk.
Yeah, again with me, it was like the the people who did game were gaming D&D almost exclusively, and weren't necessarily willing to invest in any other type of game other than fantasy. Because we also played like Castle and Crusades, and I think Earth Dawn was another one, but Cyberpunk was they were never really interested in it.
Yeah, it's a hard sell getting people who are hardcore D&D players to really bust out of that shell. And if you have a game that doesn't have any magic, yeah, it's like pulling teeth. It's not hard to sell a Dungeons and Dragon player on Shadowrun.
True.
Which is why it eventually, like in the 80s and 90s, like why it eventually pulled ahead. Because it's just an easier sell to your standard gamer.
Yeah, and I think also with Shadowrun, with FASA was definitely a bit of a bigger company than Altair at the time. So I think they could push out more product and dive into different medias, right? So I think Shadowrun, because it was FASA, right? They had the guy who started FASA also started working or creating a media division of FASA, which led to the BattleTech computer game, which also led into the Shadowrun game. So they had that kind of avenue, and then they also had they also stressed like the novels, like especially with all their lines.
They really broke out into the multimedia. Like I said, they were just a powerhouse in the especially in the 90s, and it allowed them to pull ahead, and they stayed ahead for a long time. Really, it wasn't until now that Cyberpunk started seeing bigger numbers.
Very true. So, speaking of Cyberpunk, let's get into tonight's topic, which is we're going to start dissecting Live and Direct, a Splatbook specifically for the media, and it kind of applies to the Rocker Boy. I know we're going to try to tackle the Rocker Boy supplement as well, but there's a lot of stuff that kind of cross blends with Rocker Boy and media, especially when it comes to the big corporations and how media is done within the genre. So the writers of this supplement were Lisa Smedman.
Lisa Smedman. That's actually a fairly large name. She's a novelist. Most popularly known for her Forgotten Realms and Shadowrun books, like we were just talking about. She used to write for a magazine called what was it called?
Adventure or something like that.
Adventures Unlimited, and during her time writing for that, she actually wrote 3 Cyberpunk 2020 specific adventures. About 15 years ago, I want to say, I reached out to her, and she gave me permission to host those adventures on Datafortress2020.
Nice.
Death Song, Ride the Divine Whirlwind, and Road Warriors. They're all pretty good adventures. So yeah, she's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't think I've read any of her Forgotten Realms. Then again, I started reading the Forgotten Realms back in the 90s and kind of stopped afterwards.
Last one of hers I read was part of the Spider Queen Wars thing. She wrote a book called Extinction. Part of a trilogy of books. She all 3 of them were done by different authors, and then I think she did the last one. It was to tie into whatever event was going on in the Forgotten Realms in, I want to say 2006, 2007, somewhere around there. It was a good novel. I enjoyed it. I mean, it's Forgotten Realms stuff, so.
Yep. Then we have
Dungeon. It's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. Then we have Will Moss, who's done other Talsorian stuff. Steph Brochu. That's how you pronounce it. I think that's how you pronounce it. And Mike Roeder. Steph and Mike, I don't think they've been in other supplements, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, Steph and Mike, I don't recall them working on anything else. But Will and Lisa, yeah, they're pretty big names. Will's done a lot.
Yeah, so art's done by Chris Huckabout, our favorite cyberpunk illustrator. Brent Ferguson, Kerry.
Brent Ferguson also did work for Atlas Games, and I want to say he did the art for Green War, I think. He also did a comic in the 90s called Terminal Drift, I think. I really enjoyed it. It was basically edgerunners versus the Pope. It was pretty cool.
Sounds interesting. Kari Polkovich, Mark Schumann, and Dave Ackerman Gray.
Yeah.
And of course, Mark Sherman did
another veteran of Talsorian games. He also did the art layout, and yeah. I don't know who Mark Schumann is, or Kerry Polkovich, for that matter.
Mark Schumann did the back cover, or colored the back cover. Sorry.
Yeah, he also did all the interior shading. So
makes sense. So again, there's an introduction, kind of gets you into, like most of the Splat books, kind of get you into the whole atmosphere of what's going on.
It is a 3-page introduction. It's I gotta say, it's printed on like a gray background, so black and gray with like a brick layout going on. The book gets hard to read at points. Just to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean it's very dense reading, to say the least.
It is,
and there's not too much breakup of that dense reading to like kind of take your mind off of whatever subject it is. So the first chapter kind of gets into the history of media, where it was for before the 20th century. Then it gets into when it talks about media, it actually, for each era, they segment it out into the different genres. Well, most of it. So it kind of makes it a lot thicker to read going through it. And again, you always want to read where it came from and then where it's going. That was interesting to read about the Stewart Act and how censorship kind of locked down. I think, that's a page and a third that they dedicated to that. I think they could have condensed it down into a couple more paragraphs.
Really, that's kind of indicative of the whole book, though.
Yeah.
Just to give everybody a warning, this is one of the larger books from Hartal Sorian, but it's pretty much all flavor. It's all lore. There's no real rules. There's no real gear, tech, or anything like that. It's flavor.
Yeah, 97 pages worth of flavor.
Dense flavor, like lots of it.
Yeah, and then after the Stewart Act, when elections started coming back, then it talks about how the corporations took over, and how the two main corporate medias, which is GMS and Network 54 or Net 54, basically control almost all the media, which is weird because you have WNS, which is another media organization within the world, but it's always seems like those other two are the main focus, and those are the ones that do media, which I don't know. I suppose it's the same thing.
That's always come across more of like a entertainment type thing, whereas
WNS is specifically towards news.
Yeah,
I get that.
I got that backwards. So duh, I'm an idiot.
But it's
yeah, you kind of see where they're going. You get the idea that basically it's CNN, NBC, and Fox News, and they're very interchangeable as to which is which, depending on what you're reading at any given moment.
Exactly. And of course, there's what they call the quiet corporate war in between all these organizations, and I think you learn a little more about how that quiet war is waged between the media and corporations. The second chapter, which is Tools of the Media, basically does a breakdown of the different types of media, whether it's print, which of course is dead except for scream sheets, television,
radio, movies,
and brain dance.
It's a very brief, brain dance. There's a very brief mention of the internet where they just kind of glom over it because this was written in the 90s, where really no one could have foreseen just how powerful the internet would be and how almost thoroughly it has destroyed traditional forms of media.
Yep.
It's in a lot of ways the book is fairly prophetic in how the media has changed and how corporates pretty much control every notion of what gets released. But in other ways, it's extremely dated because all these media outlets really just kind of no longer exist.
But the one thing I like is it talks about the mainstream versus the underground.
Indeed.
And like you pointed out, there's very little brief of the net. However, the only thing that you get from the net is the underground news, whether you're going to BBS's in the net and finding information out there.
Yeah, all the people who worked on this book are humongous fans of Pump Up the Volume.
Well, Pump Up the Volume and probably Max Headroom.
Yeah, that too. I think Max Headroom kind of goes without saying though, because if you're a Cyberpunk fan, you're a Max Headroom fan, because that's so influential on the genre.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, to me, there is some goodness in here. Specifically when it gets into like the pirate stations and the underground revelation of news, but it also, you got to read the corporate version because you're getting propaganda versus what the reality is. And of course,
yeah,
it's interesting that they talk about was it Dr. Paradox here, which I think there is a few shards about Dr. Paradox in 2077
Yes, there are.
and his crazy rants.
You get some more goodness from C.J. O'Reilly from the Solo of Fortune books.
Yep. Then it gets into music and talks about how music is controlled. Again, that's why it's kind of a blend of some rocker boy stuff, but it's not necessarily a music scene, right? So it's only like a couple pages in which it talks about music industry.
Yeah, it vacillates between actually like giving advice on how to incorporate a media into your campaigns, and actually just giving the state of media in the Cyberpunk 2020 world. It's really interesting to me the way they've done this. Like I said, this book is almost all lore and flavor text, and it can actually be intimidating, especially since it's such a niche. I think media is probably the least played character role in the games that I've run. I've tried to get people to play them more often, but it's a lot of work to play a media.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've had a few, but the problem with them is oftentimes their media role is not necessarily the
primary,
in the story.
Because, like I said, it takes work. Like, if you're playing a media, that means you've got to be writing a story. You've got to be presenting that story. Your role is not passive, but it always kind of gets relegated to the background unless the game is centered around that. I think media is more than any other role really should take advantage of that blue booking that they talk about in Listen Up, You Primitive Screwheads.
Yeah.
And a lot of GM player one-on-one collaboration, maybe outside a game. Playing a media can be incredibly rewarding, but it also requires a lot of work. And this book helps with that.
Yeah. And it definitely does a deep dive into brain dance, the different types of brain dance, and why people get addicted to it. So
indeed,
that part of the chapter is definitely worth a reading, in my opinion. Then we're blowing through this book compared to Solo, but again, I think Solo had a little more meat. Well,
the Solo had lots of stuff to break up the flavor.
Right. Solo was like popcorn. This is more like a full course meal that you have to dig into and slowly enjoy.
Yeah, Solo was like a third flavor, a third gear, and then a third just, other goodness.
Yep. Which, of course, gets us to the next chapter, which is the power of the media. This chapter, I think, shouldn't have been a full chapter. I think it should have been like little sidebars and little commentaries throughout the rest of the source book. But basically, in this particular chapter, it dives into different types of stories and how the media kind of impacts the world. Or to me, they're more story than really relevant to a particular game, right? And they kind of give background to the world, but it's kind of like background that, I don't know, it's not necessarily needed.
It's very niche background. Like, if you're not playing a media, or if you're not running in a media-based campaign, most of this information is just it's not going to be relevant to your characters.
Well, even if you are playing a media, I don't think this particular chapter had that much to do with the relevance of whether you're a media or not, right? So the first story,
it's more
which is
geared, really,
about 2 pages, talks about an anchor on Net 54 who turns out to be an AI, and that AI is seeking autonomy and becoming a free will person because DMS is trying to extract them. I mean, it's an interesting read on like that whole concept. But again,
it comes across as a really, really long adventure hook.
And again, I don't know if 2 pages really was worth it. And then they get into subliminals, which subliminals. So what they did, they started using subliminals within Braindance. The story is pretty funny because they start putting in subliminals of like you need to drink a certain soda, right? And you're always going to thirst for it, and you thirst for it. So the first subject they put the subliminals on is, a cyborged up dude who, as soon as they get him out of Braindance, he starts rampaging and starts killing everybody because he's thirsty for more soda, which is funny.
Slurm.
Yeah, which is funny, but again, that's kind of a 2 or 3 paragraph story, but they turned it into another 2-page thing. Again, they get into the Braindance addiction, which I lose track of how many supplements have the same material,
same basic.
Yeah.
So
if it's been printed in one source, you constantly putting it in more and more in different sources. I
mean, it's weird. Like, everybody knows what Braindance is who plays Cyberpunk. Like, everybody has come to the same realization. But I realized in the books, they don't ever really come out and say exactly what it entails. Like in some books, they'll describe it as, being like action movies or video games where they write stuff specifically for it. In others, they're talking about like Braindance recordings of more what you see in the video game. Basically, the Strange Days experience, where it's just personal experiences being recorded.
Yep. And then the next story. Go ahead.
Strange Days approach. That's me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've really done too much with Braindance in my campaigns.
No.
I tried to do that once, in which I did a TBK with an assault, and I said, "Okay, you guys wake up from a Braindance." Well, it wasn't well received by my players. They're like, "Really, you're gonna do a Bobby Ewing on us?" I was like,
Yeah, all a fucking dream.
I didn't want to kill you guys. You guys still have more story to do. But yeah,
I've never used it directly. It's always just, it's like, okay, well, your character is doing a Braindance. Your character's watching TV. Your character goes to the movies. Like, it's never been the focus of anything going on in any of my games. The most it came down to was some people pulling some snuff film types Braindances, and my cop characters had to chase them down. But never like personal, like deep dives into it. Just never really interested me, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I've always had, or various character types I've done. I've always had to deal with some type of character flaw. I've never done a Braindance addiction, though. That would be fun to play as a character.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, and it definitely belongs in the world. It's just in the source books, they're kind of inconsistent in exactly what Braindance is, as far as what the experience is.
Mm-hmm.
I always took it in that it's like I said, I went the Strange Days approach, where even if the events are scripted, there's no interaction with it. You just follow through on whatever clip you happen to be watching at the time. But I can see how that would be very addictive. Like if you've seen the movie Strange Days, yeah. I've often wondered if the people who made that movie were Cyberpunk fans. If that's where they got the idea for it.
Well, they probably like the genre.
Oh, definitely.
Or they were fans of, what was that movie prior? Mindscape?
That's very possible. That's very possible.
Was that the name of that movie? Or Brainstorm or something crazy weird like that.
Dreamscape.
Dreamscape.
You're talking about the one with where the dude goes into people's dreams.
1984. No, there was a movie, maybe. Yeah. Yes, I think this is it. And it's like a machine.
I don't remember any machine now. I think we're talking about two different things. It's very possible.
Yeah, this is something different. Oh, this is Dennis Quaid. No, there was a movie. Maybe it was Brainstorm or Mindstorm. Basically, it was a device that they would put on their heads, and it was brain dance, really. And it was like back in the 80s. Storm. 1983. Christopher Walken. Yeah, I think it's this one. Brainstorm.
Oh, geez. Yeah, now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, you're right. That's probably where the idea originally came from.
Yeah.
Wow, I had forgotten that movie existed.
Yeah, so Brainstorm is basically the infancy of brain dance, and that came back out in '83. Yeah, so agreed. Brain dance is just a very weird type of thing, and again, you can definitely find various references in the media. But like I was saying, with this supplement, it does have, a good amount of pages dedicated towards the discussion. But like I said, there's other supplements as well that also do these deep dives of brain dance as well. And it just, to me, the regurgitation or even the conflict of messages from either of these sources can be can be a problem, especially when you're trying to figure out what is canon, right? So let's get back to this.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to get back to the supplement and continue the talk of this particular chapter, because again, it goes into another story about a live execution, which kind of was like, I know they've done it before, in which people vote on whether to execute the person or not, or clear his name.
Yeah, but you also, I'm pretty sure I know where you're going. It's the direct precursor to the Sinnerman quest in 2077.
Yeah, little less graphic, a little less controversial.
Yeah, I mean, you don't take part in it personally, but you can see that. I would be really surprised if this wasn't direct inspiration for that in the 2077 game, as it's, canon for the 2020 universe.
Yeah. And then this chapter kind of rounds off with just some small discussions of the media war between the two corporations, some of the tricks they use to kind of get people to buy into the scene, and whether medias are crusaders or not, right? Are they trying to get the truth, or are they trying to propagate propaganda? So those last 2 pages, I think, should have just been enough. Again, the previous stories could have been just little side blurbs of 1 or 2 paragraphs. If you haven't been able to tell yet, this is not one of my favorite Splatbooks of the Cyberpunk 2020. So,
Mind being honest, it just it's very niche. It's if you're not playing a media, most of this information, or running a media-based corporation,
yeah,
this information just really comes across as not as necessary. This is probably, of all the Cyberpunk supplements, this is probably my least referenced, least used.
yeah. When we start getting into the books for the regions, right? Like Rough Guide to the UK, Eurosurs Plus, Pac Rim. When we start getting into those, yes, you should have stories, you should have content, you should have, descriptions, a lot more descriptions of those territories, as opposed to this, which is, I don't know. I think they overdid it.
For a book dedicated to medias, for this not to have any tech at all in it, or any rules, it really just, like you said, they could have condensed like half of these stories down much further and thrown, some various recording devices, whatever, anything to flesh it out. All the other role specific books, Wildside, Solo of Fortune, Rocker Boy, they break free from the flavor every now and then with some, groovy bits of tech or some examples of how to run an actual like character in that role. And this kind of does that a little bit, but for the most part, it's just background flavor. It's 90 pages of background flavor.
Yeah. And to me, the Bart Morse Guide to the Net, you would say that's part. I mean, there was little nuggets for a netrunner, but it was also, in my opinion, more of a gazetteer. I don't know what it's called, but basically a supplement dedicated towards description of a new region, a new culture, a nation, right? Because the net is really its own world.
I mean, moving between LDLs, and they I don't know, it seemed to grasp the idea that this is a book for players more than live and direct.
And for me, the other role books had stuff that was related to other characters and to your campaign you're trying to run, right? And you can pull in things where a lot of it's kind of background stuff. Not a lot of players watch the media. You can try to influence and put it in there, but this book does not help with that.
No, it's written by some really talented people, and there's some fantastic art in here. But just as a supplement,
and don't get me wrong, the writing is good. It's just for a Cyberpunk supplement, I don't know.
It's really it's a chore to try and integrate all this stuff into your game, because so much of it is just like background flavor, like nothing that your characters would really interact with, unless, like I said, they are running a very specific media-based campaign.
So we're halfway through the book. No rules yet, no game stats, no nothing about the game. Then comes the In the Spotlight. There is a 2 to 3 page article on the day in the life of a media, which kind of breaks down how a media lives their life and how they would live in the world. Which is
And once
good.
again, the section is printed on black text on a gray background.
Well, Artelsorian is notorious for that.
Yeah, but it's 3 pages of it.
But the good thing, and again, to me, the previous 40 some odd pages could have been condensed into 2 or 3, or even in 1 chapter. And then you get into the day in the life. And then after the day in the life, it starts getting into actual usefulness, which is breaking down the media role into the different sub roles, similar to what Wildside did for fixers, right?
And this is really the most useful part of the book here. It breaks down. This is as close to rules additions as it gets, as it breaks down, like you said, various different types of medias and how to portray them. This isn't a very long chapter, but it's really the meat of the book right here.
Yep. And after the various roles, which include tabloid monger, war correspondent, and a bunch of other ones, which are definitely an interesting read. Again, not sure if they should have had the amount of paragraphs for each one, but it gives you choices on how to do a media and different skills to choose from. Then it gets into actual statting out a news team, right? So you have the media, who's the reporter. You would then have the techie, who would be the camera guy, right, or the driver. Netrunner would be a researcher. You would have a solo to be a bodyguard, because of course you're in 2020, so everyone needs a bodyguard. The corp would be the producer. So it kind of gives you a way in which you can start integrating other roles
in a media-based campaign.
Yeah, and you guys play as like a media crew. And then there's a 1 page of the top media people within the world, which is, of course, Dr. Paradox, CJ O'Reilly, Angie Wu, and Cameron Ride. Again, all 4 get just that 1 page.
Yeah. Everything else gets these big, long chapters basically dedicated to it.
Yeah.
And then when it actually gives you examples of NPCs, they're just all...
one sentence. This is what this person does, right?
Yeah, they give you 1 sentence for the description of the person, and then they stat them out and give you their cybernetics and their skills and their possessions. Why?
Yeah. Then the following page is 2 vehicles, an AV and a chopper. I don't know why the van is considered a chopper. But yeah.
Yeah, this is as close to gear as you get in the book. This 1 page.
The next chapter, or it's not actually next chapter, but it's called Getting the Story, in which it kind of discusses how the different media, right, news versus radio station versus screen sheets, how they print or produce stories, and how much time you get, which is also followed by doing an interview, what skills to use, and it kind of gives you, it's interesting that they use the table to kind of show the target numbers.
Our first table.
Yeah. And it gives you kind of target numbers of what you're looking to do to see what is produced. And it doesn't give a modifier to this table, except for if you make another attempt, you get minuses to try to do another attempt with the interview. As opposed to, so if I have an NPC who has a cool of 10, right, and a fast talk of 5, or, and I get interviewed, if that player rolls a 30 or plus, he basically tells them everything.
Spilling the beans, baby.
So that's like going to Saburo and saying, "Hey, tell me all the dirty secrets of Arasaka." Well, you rolled a 30, so there's this thing called Makoshi. There's, our banking industry that we have blackmail material on every single.
Taking people and throwing them into our online prisons.
We also have dirt on every single, government official and every single corporate executive. And here's all that stuff for you too.
Yeah.
I mean, that should be a roll versus, and then you determine the numbers from there.
At least, like, this is the first time you actually see rules for, how to use the interview skill or intimidate or interrogate, oratory, seduction, whatever. Like, this is the first time those rules actually get some kind of definition. But still, it's it's just a little bit in the middle of giant walls of text.
Yeah. And then the next page is how you compose your story. And there's a full page discussion of how you would compose your story and kind of gives you a timeline of how long it would take you to create a story for news versus a scream sheet versus radio. And you can kind of reduce that time by making, or there's a difficulty number based on how much time you have, right? Which
I love to roll a 30. It takes you 15 minutes. It doesn't matter how big the story is. It just takes you 15 minutes to write it.
But to me, it's like, okay, so, well, I guess if you have time pressure.
Per 25 centimeters of I guess. So. I don't know. Editing time per minute / 25 centimeters. I don't know what that is actually supposed to mean.
But then again, like, okay, who cares about time, right? I'm going to publish a story tomorrow. I'm the one who interviewed him. No one else did. And I could see this.
It's a weird thing to focus on at the exclusion of everything else they could have focused on.
Right. And if you're pressed for time, and again, I think it's even today, right? There is this kind of, I want to up to the minute news, and how that stuff gets reported. Usually news stories are coming from Associated Press or Reuters, and various news outlets will report on that stuff, right, as news. Or you have the local news that does the report, and then that propagates throughout the whole system. I don't know if time is necessarily that crucial that you have to worry about composition.
I see where it could be, like if your character's like working on a deadline or something, but I don't know that I would have dedicated that much space to it. And like I said, at the exclusion of other stuff. Like, it being in here is nice, but I mean, I would have liked some tables for the various equipment qualities for recording stories and
or how do you create a good story, right? So it would be composition plus your credibility, right, as another modifier, and then have a chart of, if you score this is how many people it affects, this is how much the government will react to it, or
the
corporation, right? Yeah. So if you roll low, the corporation does nothing. The news story is ignored. If you roll really high, the corporation disassociates themselves with that branch, does an internal investigation, fires those people. Those people are brought up to charges.
Apology. Yeah, I mean, something like along those lines.
And that's how news story, or how it's portrayed in movies. How powerful the news can be, even with Max Headroom. Yes, his stories weren't always successful in bringing down the corporation, but it gnawed at it, right, and chipped away at it.
This book came out just as Transmetropolitan was starting, and from the very first episode, Transmetropolitan's been my favorite book of all time. And I was really excited to get this book because I was like, yeah, I can, yeah. And then for the real lack of rules of how to run that, it just always left kind of a sour taste in my mouth.
Yeah,
like disappointment.
Yeah, so that chapter is the one that had actual kind of useful material for the game itself. Again, not sure about the interview or the composition and how they did those rules, but it's something, right? As opposed to trying to figure it out on your own.
Like finding credible sources to get to that big story. They just really the book really just kind of takes it for granted that you get to the guy you need to interview, the big guy, and have the big scoop, but it doesn't get into any of the minutia of getting to that point, and I would have preferred more of that.
And I think that's why I like Red's version of credibility as a special ability, because it actually defines what you're doing as a media, you know.
Yeah, Red is. I mean, you've heard me talk about it a lot. It was one of the impetuses for me doing Interlock Unlimited and changing all the roles is because this is one of those roles where it's just really abstract as to what you're supposed to be doing with it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's another thing. They don't address the special ability at all.
Not at all. None of it. Like, not even as a bonus to those tables. Like, nothing. Your credibility... credibility as a role is... Or as a special ability is just ignored in this book. And it... Whereas with Wildside, it went deep into depth of how you're supposed to play that out and how it works.
Yep. Then you get into the next chapter of media campaigns, which is useful if you're looking to create media campaigns. It kind of gives you some directions and some type of campaign themes that you would use when you're dealing with the media as an organization, whether it's, you know, your freelance versus pirated underground media. And
we get another full page of a sample TV guide listing.
Well, I like those.
I like them, but how many books have we already gotten this in? Rock Boy, there was Home of the Brave. I mean, it's fun. It's fun, but it's a whole page of it.
But it's a media supplement, and I'm happy with that. They only put one page, right?
I guess, yeah, that's it's only one page.
And it's one page. It's appropriate in the supplement. It's appropriate in Land of the Free or Home of the Brave. I always get those confused. So
appropriate. You see, and it just again, I'm kind of. I look at the book and I'm still to this day a little bit disappointed. It didn't go more into detail on other things, other aspects of the media.
Well, it also gives you ideas of how to play bad medias, right? Who propagate the propaganda.
Yeah, I like that it gives you it really gives you the good, the bad, and the ugly being, you know, pirate media. This chapter is one of the more useful chapters in the game. Again, I think they could have added some rules to this. That's my real only complaint.
Yep. And to finish out the book, the last chapter is basically a background on the two media corporations, DMS and Net54. There is no. It's kind of. Some of it is a little bit of a corporate profile, but not really, right? Compared to like the corporate books in which it kind of lists their various assets. And goes into a little more detail of what the corporation has to back it up. This is more or less background fluff for these corporations.
Yeah, it's basically their own mini corp reports, but without all the useful information, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, even, it would have been nice if they had, like, the statted out presidents. They do go into Howard Wong and his story, but why don't they stat them out like they've done with the other corporates? And even Net54, or World, sorry, it's not Net54, it's World News. Oh, no, Net54, they do have World News, so there's 3 corporations.
Yeah, it gives, I mean, they're the 3 big ones.
Yeah, but I mean, just, like in they talk about DMS's CEO, but they don't talk about the other two's leadership teams, which would have been helpful.
Yeah, it like I said, it's all like 90% of the 95% of the book is flavor with just a little bit of stuff that like relatively nothing in terms of what to do. And when there is stuff like this, where it gives examples of play or even the campaign in the book is mostly just flavor.
Yep. I know it's early, but basically that's the book. Again, if I had to rank my books, Live and Direct would be probably one of. I'm trying to think of what one I would have put even below it.
Hardwired?
Well, Hardwired isn't really canonical, right? To 2020.
No. I'm just saying for official products. Like I think I've actually referenced Hardwired and When Gravity Fails more than this book.
Yeah.
There's just for the average Cyberpunk player, there's just I can't really recommend buying this book because there's just not anything for them there. Even for most medias, if you're playing a media just as part of a larger campaign that doesn't focus on you, there's not really a whole lot in this book you're going to find that's going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
The couple of tables are okay. The examples of play are solid, like the different types of media there are. That's some solid information, but it's 95 pages of it's like 90 pages of fluff and like maybe 5 pages of information that an actual player would find useful for the most part.
Or a referee.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of background information. If you're a completist, buy the book. If you want to know as much as you can about canon, there's a lot of information here that is part of the lore, but it just is really just one little corner of the game that is expanded out to this for a Talsorian book, what's one of their larger source books.
Yep. And to me, I'd rather buy the Rocker Boy.
Yeah.
Because there's this pretty much almost duplicate information.
Yeah, and Rocker Boy's got the bits of tech and the bits of rules, and like it's half the size of this book, but it's much more useful. Even though it's a 2013 source book. Yeah, I wanted to like this book much more than I ended up liking it. It's I like everyone involved in writing the book. I like the artists. I don't. It's not a book that gets used.
And again, the writing is good. It's just the content doesn't necessarily fly, especially with the purpose of it, which was, I didn't think the purpose was to describe every little nuance of the media. I thought it was more or less a book really getting dedicated towards the media role, or even the rocker boy, right?
I mean, I get the fluff. I get that they want to fill out the world, but I would have preferred something more along the lines of like Neo Tribes, where it's more directly impacting of the game you're running. This is like the R. Talsorian version of the Silmarillion, kind of. It's just a big chore to read, and it doesn't really impact your game.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, this is a short hope, or short tale from us two, I'm afraid. Because I don't want to get into the rocker boy, because like I said, I think there's a lot more meat in here that we can discuss. Specifically the layout, which is kind of like the Solo of Fortunes. It's kind of a magazine format, but I'd rather save that for the next episode that we do the reviews.
Its own thing. I tend to agree. Yeah, I can't really. There's nothing really else to say about this book. In some ways, it was kind of prophetic in how the media has become corporate controlled. In other ways, it's ridiculously dated. It was written at a time when we couldn't possibly imagine the impact the internet would have on the way we digest media. To the point that, television, magazines, newspapers, these aren't really a thing in our day-to-day life anymore. We watch streaming services. We get our news from the internet. Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, this book. It's one of those that doesn't seem to really have a whole lot of impact on the game or the world, to be honest.
Yep. So I think I'm kind of winding down. Again, I don't have too much else to say. Other than if you're a completionist, by all means go and snag it. If you're bored and want to, need some help getting to sleep, this book can probably help with that. But
I mean, a PDF on Drive-Thru RPG is not expensive. It's like $6 or $7.
Yeah. So it's well worth the price.
Yeah, you're getting a ton of information. It's just I don't know how much information is going to be relevant to you or your game. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah. All right. So next episode, like I said, we're supposed to be having an interview with Jay Gray. I got to touch base with him and remind him. Hopefully he remembers. Else we'll come up with something, I'm sure. Then the following episode is going to be on the Rocker Boy, right? So the last or the second episode of a month, we do a deep dive into one of the various 2020 supplements. And because it's getting towards that season, I think we're going to be here for the first Wednesday of December, but we're going to take a few weeks off, or a few episodes off, catch our breaths, figure out what we want to do, try to work out, the coming year, what we can try to get done for everyone, to keep this going.
As always, don't be afraid to drop us a line, either on the Discord or, through various other channels, email, Facebook, whatever, however you can get a hold of us. If you've got ideas for what you'd like to see on the show or questions for us, by all means, we love interacting.
Or have us talk about stuff. Definitely should do like a episode of War Stories.
Yeah, that would be fun.
So that's it. I am the Cybersmily. You can find my work over on cybersmily.net. That's Cybersmily without the ending E. I also am floating around on several different Discords that have everything to do with Cyberpunk, whether it's Cyberpunk 2020, Cyberpunk Red, even some 2077 Discord servers I'm on. Also a writing Cyberpunk Discord. I'm also follow the various Reddits for Cyberpunk. I might start getting back into Twitter and Facebook because that's what people use. Although I really don't want to because there's just so much toxicity there. It's
definitely a distraction.
As long as I don't read other people's posts, I should be fine. But yeah, and you can catch me out on Cybernation Uncensored's Discord, and of course you can find me here on Tales from the Forlorn Dopes. Over to you.
I am Wisdom. That's Wisdom with 3 zeros behind it. I run Datafortress2020.com, the largest, most comprehensive Cyberpunk 2020 site you're going to find. You can get a hold of me there or on... you can get a hold of me through Cybersmily's Discord. I don't hang out on Discord much during the week, but if you message me or hell, even mention me, I'll get an alert and I'll try and respond. I snipe comments on Reddit on the various Cyberpunk 2020 Red and other affiliated channels there. I'm on Facebook, both at the Datafortress 2020 group and the Cyberpunk 2020 group, as well as the Cybernation Uncensored group. We love hearing from you, and any interaction we can have, we're all for.
Yep. We also like to thank Rob and Cybernation Uncensored for hosting us. So go check his stuff out at cybernationuncensored.com, as well as his Discord. And you're already on his Twitch, so you know about all his various actual plays for not only Cyberpunk Red, but also various other things like Dune, RPG, what was the other one? Cowboys and Coyotes? Or am I thinking?
Fallout.
Fallout. And a bunch of other stuff coming up. Definitely keep on coming back to this channel because there is a wealth of media here. So, all right. Well, I guess
thank you very much, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, and we're signing out. See ya.
Cybernation Uncensored.